Climate change is a lived phenomenon, whether you are in the middle of the drought or up to your ears in the flood. It's intrinsically interwoven with our humanness.
Climate change impacts and climate change incidents are increasing in frequency and in intensity. And we've seen over the past couple of years, over the past decade, South African cities have also been impacted by climate change, whether it's flash flooding, whether it's extreme droughts, prolonged droughts, whether it's food security issues, water security issues.
Life is really tough in a lot of cities in the global south. The difference between people with money and people without money is enormous. It's like two different continents.
For many people, climate change is not real, but especially in our more impoverished areas, we see that there's no water. In some of our communities, there's literally no water.
It's increasing the complexity that already exists in cities. They're faced with issues of unemployment and inequality, housing backlogs, infrastructure and service delivery backlogs, then compounded on top of that with the impacts of climate change and these extreme weather events, that just makes their lives even more complicated.
I think it's naive for us to think that just government intervention is going to solve the problem. Industry, everyday people will have to do things differently to come up with new ideas to solve it.
We are not fully at that stage where a lot of enterprises are actually responding directly and creating innovations on climate change. So one of the challenges, if you ask me, is how they conceptualize and embed issues of climate change response into a normal, entrepreneurship models.
The average field band member is probably not going to be aware of COP or any of the other large statistics, but they do know that petrol prices are increasing. They do know that sometimes there's shortages of food. They do know that some employment opportunities close down. I think that there is a sense that the world is increasingly under stress, under threat, and I think it's there all the time.
We've looked at one of the characteristics of a resilient city or territory is the quality or thickness of relationships between people and between citizens and public authorities. Resilience basically means how you deal with change, whether it's short-term shocks or longer-term systemic change. So resilience has to be very much about how do human beings change the way they do things, change their mindsets, habits, behaviors, attitudes, conceived notions, narratives about themselves and their community and their city.
Resilience strategies should be inclusive. Working in silos is not going to solve any of our issues. And government, as an environmental authority, cannot solve our problems. Therefore, the climate change issues, there needs to be partnership between different stakeholders as well as government.
The work that we do in adaptation currently mainly focuses on water, so drought response within government or work within agriculture. We are preparing these organizations to either do adaptation work or allowing younger kids to start thinking about their role as citizens.
It's about survival. If you work in the East Coast or the coastal areas of South Africa, fishing stocks have diminished and deteriorated. These are fishing communities that now suddenly don't have fish. It's those that are vulnerable that we are interested in, those that are vulnerable that indeed become more open, to accepting strategies of adaptation.
Communities that are most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change, informal settlements, the vulnerable, poor, indigent communities, the unemployed women, youth, people with disabilities, those are the most disproportionately affected when disaster strikes. If those very vulnerable are given the tools to enable them to build their own social, economic resilience, then it's easier for the other stratas of society to be empowered to do that.
An enterprise called Meet Naturally, they now began to innovate. They started looking at mobilizing communities to form associations. If we want to deal with how communities should adapt or become more resilient, the land itself must be of such value to an extent that people realize that if we destroy this, we actually are destroying our own livelihoods. That's the kind of innovations that we really want. So we can build our rural areas again in such a way that we are able to sustain ourselves and actually ensure that our people have a living.
People are trying to find innovative solutions about our challenges. We work with a local company where we deliver food to bedridden beneficiaries from community kitchens and for customers from a supermarket to a doorstep. These innovative solutions, they contribute a lot in service delivery, in trying to find ways of greening our own spaces.
I've learned that making a home is trying to make a difference for where you live. And for me, that meant starting an organization called Open Streets. It happens all over the world where people are trying to reimagine streets as public space. Short stretches of street became car-free. That became a reference point to what cities could look like if we had less cars and more people on the streets.
Resilience building is, as an organization, it's about offering access to these technologies. It's about listening to people. It's about building trust and dialogue and keeping that dialogue open. And that component contributes to the resilience of the relationship.
Communication and collaboration is key because it builds relationship, it addresses the issues of complexity.
I think that civil society organizations and community-based organizations are particularly well positioned because they already have trust in their communities or in the spaces that they work in, and so they can essentially start applying pressure for change.
People have got to be part of common identification of the problem, common understanding of what problem we are solving for. If people don't have a relationship to the problem-solving process and the solution-finding process, whatever solution you put in place is going to be short-lived.
There's so much innovative activities happening in township. The policies that we have, they don't really respond to that informal ways of how they can scale them up and how they can support them. Some of the policies, they go in a way that they are kind of seen as gatekeeping to these people who are doing so much in trying to save the planet. There is some policy shift that needs to happen.
I think that civic voice is still very, very important in legislation and in writing strategies. Otherwise, we're just writing policies for the sake of writing them.
Despite my years in small-scale fisheries, there's that local knowledge that is so critical, and it enables a level of communication and understanding that's just second to none. But it's those insights that are just so powerful, that ability to look into a community in real time, sort of lift the veil and see what's really happening.
Climate change isn't an algorithm on a spreadsheet. It is a deeply human phenomenon, experience, causation. And if we leave out the humanness of that, we'll never properly be able to find solutions. We'll never be able to create anything that is going to be worthwhile.
I can't do everything alone. I need some people. It's more like when we are all in a relationship plan of trying to achieve something, it's like a relay whereby I run up until I get tired at this stage. I pass the sticker to another person up until the finishing line. Once they get there, we all contributed.